How do you unite behind decisions, complicated decisions with such a thin margin? What about your own role?
Yeah, well, I have decided, Andrea, I'm not going to seek re-election.
You too?
Yeah, I am joining Kay and probably some others in the near future, but I've decided that it is time for me to do some other things. I'm always have been disappointed with our inability in Congress to deal with major issues, and I'm also disappointed that the Republican Party continues to, rely on this lie that the 2020 election was stolen and rely on the January 6th narrative and the political prisoners from January 6th and other things. If we're going to solve difficult problems, we've got to deal with some very unpleasant truths or lies and make sure that we project to the public what the truth is.
That's Republican Congress member Ken Buck. Not just any Republican Congress member, a member of the so-called Freedom Caucus, which is supposed to be the more right-wing members of the Republican Party. But all of those labels right now are completely out the window now that the Republican Party is owned by MAGA, and it's now the MAGA Republican Party, or just MAGA. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. I don't know about you, but it was astonishing to watch Ken Buck, member of Congress, Republican from Colorado, go on MSNBC and state that he was quitting, that he would no longer be seeking re-election as a member of Congress, that he was done. And I found myself throughout the proceedings where the MAGA Republicans ousted Kevin McCarthy, and I would hear Ken Buck speaking on CNN, MSNBC, and other TV networks where I would say, you know what? Ken Buck is someone who, on most things, I vehemently disagree with. But some of the things that he's saying when it comes to preserving and protecting our democracy, admitting that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, I agree with Ken Buck on those. That Ken Buck seems like, compared to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boeberts and Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan's, Ken Buck, who's a constitutional professor as well in his spare time, is someone who I think, at least at a certain level, takes the Constitution seriously, satisfying that minimal threshold. And then that got me thinking more, just how the MAGA Republicans, and I've said this over and over again, and President Joe Biden says that this is not your parents' or grandparents' Republican Party. These MAGA Republicans are not actually conservative, and the media needs to stop saying, oh, these are conservatives. There's nothing conservative about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and these others who want to overthrow the results of free and fair election and appoint Donald Trump as a dictator. Here you have Ken Buck. This was during the tumult of the ouster of Kevin McCarthy when Jim Jordan was named as the speaker designee, where Ken Buck received death threats for coming out against Jim Jordan. Play this clip.
Part of the reason that there's temper right now is this constant barrage of phone calls. I have 6 full-time people answering the phones. I have 20,000 messages from people where we couldn't. So far, I've had 4 death threats. I've been evicted from my office in Colorado. I have notice of an eviction because the landlord is mad with my voting record on the speaker issue. And everybody in the conference is getting this. So it's natural. Family members have been approached and threatened. All kinds of things are going on. There's going to be some tension. 4 death threats, Congressman, because you're not supporting Jim Jordan? That's right.
And here from a few weeks back is Republican Congress member Ken Buck, who stated to Jen Psaki that Marjorie Taylor Greene is just completely and utterly lacking in any decency, in any common sense, in any integrity, and that her ideas of impeaching President Joe Biden are just ridiculous. Here, play this clip.
Yesterday, she posted, quote, this, quote, "Our country deserves for Congress to vote for an impeachment inquiry for very important reasons, not a rush impeachment vote. That is a bit of a shift in the timeline, a little bit of a pumping of the brakes on it. What did you make of that?
Well, Marjorie filed impeachment, articles of impeachment on President Biden before he was sworn into office more than 2.5 years ago. So the idea that she is now the expert on impeachment, or that she is someone who should set the timing on impeachment, is absurd. The time for impeachment is the time when there's evidence linking President Biden, if there's evidence linking President Biden to a high crime or misdemeanor. That doesn't exist right now, and it isn't really something that we can say, well, in February we're going to do this. It's based on the facts. You go where the facts take you.
Here was an audio recording, you may recall also, of Ken Buck on a radio program back on September 7th, 2023, talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here, play this clip.
Marjorie Taylor Greene came out and said, we played the sound yesterday, that she's like, I'm not voting for any budget bill, no continuing resolution, nothing that doesn't involve the defunding of Jack Smith's special counsel office and everything that he's doing. Do you feel similarly about that issue as you do to defunding the FBI and the ATF and the DEA, et cetera?
So George, when I was teaching law school, I learned and taught certain constitutional principles. When Marjorie Taylor Greene was teaching CrossFit, she learned a whole different set of values, evidently, because my idea of what this country should be like is based on the Constitution. And she sees the world differently. She's criticized me for, voting to certify the election in 2020. The Constitution says Congress shall count the votes. It doesn't say Congress may overturn an election result. It doesn't say Congress can do whatever the heck it wants with this election. Shall count the votes. That's what the Constitution says. In her CrossFit class, maybe they didn't cover that. And it also, the Constitution also says that, the impeachment of a president shall be based on treason, high crimes, misdemeanors. It doesn't say it's a political exercise,
right?
And we hope the Senate does the right thing. And so I get tired of people. One of the beauties of Congress is you bring 435 people together from different backgrounds, and you try to reach a consensus on issues. When you've got people who care more about their social media accounts than they do about the Constitution, we have a real problem in Congress.
And here is Ken Buck from early September as well on CNN saying that he sees no evidence linking Joe Biden to any of Hunter Biden's business activities. Play this clip.
2 days ago, you said that the time for impeachment is when there's evidence linking President Biden to a high crime or misdemeanor. You said, quote, that doesn't exist right now. Do you still feel that way tonight?
I have not seen any evidence that links President Biden to Hunter Biden's activities at this point. I will be getting a briefing later in the week. I'm looking forward to understanding more of what the Oversight Committee has uncovered. But at this point, I have not seen that evidence.
And here is Ken Buck stating that the impeachment inquiry by the MAGA Republicans is a distraction to try to take people's attention away from the GOP's dysfunction. Play this clip.
I think that the weaponization of government committee, the impeachment of the president are all distractions that will make sure that the base is excited, make sure the base is donating money, make sure that people don't focus on the dysfunction that we have with a speaker who promises something different to a lot of different groups and can't deliver.
You know, and I also reflect on the news today is a great example that the Congressional Budget Office raided the House MAGA Mike Johnson, the new Speaker of the House's Israel aid bill, which was a gimmick where the MAGA Republicans basically said, we need to defund the IRS by $14.5 billion in order to pass a military aid package. And then they tried to pretend that was going to decrease the deficit. But as the CBO stated, as I said here when they announced it, of course that's going to increase the deficit. If you fund the IRS collects more tax revenue, has more enforcement procedures. And the CBO says that the new MAGA Republican bill is actually going to increase the deficit by $12.5 billion in the next decade. by preventing the IRS from engaging in enforcement procedures, which we told you was what was going to happen. And by the way, this is what Marjorie Taylor Greene's response was back in September to Ken Buck. When is Ken Buck going to announce he's a Democrat? The amount of shilling for Joe Biden is astounding, almost like he's hoping Joe is going to appoint him for something. And again, that just shows you again how extreme the Republican Party has become, that it's now taken over by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene is calling, and people like that are calling Ken Buck a rhino. They're calling people like Bill Barr a rhino. Donald Trump's not a conservative. Donald Trump's a fascist madman who added $8 trillion of debt. Okay, this is not a conservative party. They want the government to control people's lives and decisions, who you can marry, what you do in your doctor's office. And I think that while I disagree with Ken Buck on a lot, let me be very clear, a lot, fundamentally, Ken Buck can no longer make it in the Republican Party. That should tell you exactly where this party has gone. Okay? And that's the message that I think you should be sharing with your Republican friends who are still kind of on the fence of like, what are there issues on both sides? Both sides. I mean, this Republican Party is not really the Republican Party. There's pro-democracy, and then there's kind of this MAGA fascism. That's just what exists right now. That's the appropriate framing. Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 2 million subscribers. Thanks to your support, and have a great day.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.